The Taliban have declared victory. Now they must reckon with a country free falling into chaos. It was a decisive and humbling final chapter to the United States' longest war, a 2-decade effort that unraveled spectacularly in the space of a few weeks. Standing on the runway on Tuesday, Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid framed the militant group's dramatic takeover of Afghanistan as a nationalist success, telling a small crowd, "This victory belongs to us all." But for thousands of Afghans, the final Western flights took with them a last chance to leave the country. Many now fear their new realities, in particular, women, religious minorities, LGBTQ people, journalists and others face brutal treatment under the group's radical interpretation of Sharia law. And for the Taliban's leaders, a rapid transition to national governance beckons. The group has no experience of running a traditional administration, and showed little familiarity with geopolitics during its 5-year reign 2 decades ago. Their sincerity and capability now has repercussions for 38 million Afghans, many of whom will be displaced or thrust into economic crisis. What the Taliban now do with that country is arguably the world's most pressing geopolitical question. The West is pulling out not only ourselves but all the human resources that have worked with us for 20 years, he said. Those will be replaced with what? That's a question mark. It's a question that reverberates not just through the region, but around the world. As they weigh up whether and how to recognize the country, global governments have mostly been unmoved by the Taliban's repeated promises that they have changed. What kind of government will the Taliban run? The Taliban's rule at the end of the millennium was a global anomaly. They weren't a government, said Price, who monitored the country at the time for the Economist intelligence unit. The group's priority was literally just about imposing Sharia law, he said. But now the group's leaders are in unfamiliar territory. When they arrived last time around, it was after a civil war. There was nothing. Now they're inheriting a system of government that, however imperfect, does exist, Price said. The question that no one knows the answer to is how the Taliban conceive of government. As it assembles some form of political administration, observers are keenly watching whether Taliban leaders will allow for a diversity of viewpoints. To what extent are the Taliban going to be able to lead an inclusive process of government? Are they going to be able to include different factions of society and other ethnic groups? Asks Petrini, echoing the queries of the world's leaders. What the Taliban do with the security sector is crucial, he adds. The Taliban may naturally be inclined to wipe out and replace the police and military, in order to ensure loyalty among those forces. But such a move could open the door to further instability and protest, and damage the government's legitimacy in the short term. For the people of Afghanistan, a fundamental concern is how strictly the group will police the lives of Afghans. Already, worrying signs have emerged. Afghan commandos, members of the media, singers and various other members of society have been targeted, threatened, dragged from their homes or executed in recent weeks. And the Taliban have already conceded a fundamental flaw in their overtures to the international media. Even if they wanted to fulfill each promise of inclusion and restraint they have made, their rank-and-file militants may not. The group told working women to stay home last week, admitting they weren't safe in the presence of their own soldiers. The Taliban are going to have to establish themselves as legitimate, so they can't necessarily rule with an iron fist, Petrini said. In the big cities there's going to be a dramatic change in the short term. It's undeniable that there's going to a reverse in human rights standards, in women's rights, women's access to labor. All of these things that we measure as metrics and that have been slowly improving in Afghanistan in the last 20 years, they are going to be reversed in the short term. A young population on the brink of crisis, but that was all because of huge Western aid money going in. What didn't happen was the development of a permanent economy, Price added. The Taliban's takeover has already pushed the country to the brink of economic collapse. Afghanistan's banks remain shuttered 2 weeks after their takeover, and many people can't access cash. There is little doubt that the Taliban's foremost domestic problem, if they decide to form a traditional government, is the free-falling economy. International agencies are sounding the alarm about multiple humanitarian crises in the country. The UN warned on Tuesday that 18 million people in the country need assistance urgently to survive. A humanitarian catastrophe looms, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said in a statement. People are losing access to basic goods and services every day. The country's healthcare system is among them, Medicine Sans Frontiers country representative Felipe Ribeiro warned on Monday. The overall health system in Afghanistan is understaffed, under-equipped and underfunded, for years. And the great risk is that this underfunding will continue over time, he said. And a hunger crisis is taking hold. Up to 14 million Afghans could face starvation as early as September, World Food Programme Executive Director David Beasley has warned. He said that the WFP is running out of money, adding that the agency requires $200 million additional funding to continue operations in Afghanistan for the rest of the year. If we don't receive these funds, then you're talking about millions of people, just like you had in Syria, that very well could start migrating, fleeing out of the country desperate for food. It remains to be seen how easily the Taliban will allow assistance to flow through the country. And many warn that the situation could be worsened if the international community imposes financial punishments on the Taliban. It looks as if it's going to be very tough. People are still going to work in the hope they will get paid, but not many will keep working for free, said Justosi. If the money is not released, it will be a huge humanitarian emergency. In a year or two from now, they will need to come to our aid anyway, Justosi said, imitating a potential line of thinking within the Taliban. They think they can ignore us, but they can't. The world is watching. Every move made by the Taliban in the coming weeks will be analyzed in several time zones, as global governments grapple with the complicated question of how closely they should cooperate with the group. The world has mostly been non-committal so far, and global organizations like the World Bank have already suspended operations in the country.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.